I'm now joined by Marinela Petrova, the Deputy Finance Minister of Bulgaria. And if I could just read out from your bio, because this is a very impressive list of your responsibilities. It says you're responsible for government debt, state aid, macroeconomic forecasting, financial markets regulations, relations with the EU, the supervisory board of the fund management of financial instruments, the Black Sea Trade and Development Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and you're on the board of directors of the EIB.
Should I be ashamed of that?
I'm wondering how you fill your days. Can I start by asking the first question for all Bulgaria watchers, the most obvious central question, I suppose, about the euro. There is talk about 2022, or is it 2023 entry? Is that still the plan? Is my first question. And secondly, what do we need to do to achieve that? What do you need to do?
Everyone knows, I guess, that this is one of our top priorities in the recent 2-3 years, and it's been announced by the government program at the time when they stepped in. So the intention is indeed to join the Eurozone at earliest in 2023, and the date was set after having some discussions with the Commissioner Dombrovskis and the Commission staff. The reason why is this so is because for 2 years we need to fulfill the criteria, and then for 1 year we would need the Commission and the Central Bank to make their estimates and to give their opinion on our readiness to join the Eurozone. So in short, indeed, we stick to this deadline and we'll work hard on that.
Mm-hmm. And the practical developments, practical steps for Euroization?
Yeah. First, maybe it's worth to mention that now we are focused on fulfilling the prior commitments for joining the ERM2, and on government side, I can happily report that we already made them happen. Mm-hmm. We faced, of course, some difficulties and some delays, especially in the part of SOEs management, state-owned enterprises management, anti-money laundering, but so far so good. So I think we are on the same side with the Commission, seeing that the things have been done on the banking side and the comprehensive review. We are still waiting for our central bank and the ECB to finalize the assessment of the 2 remaining banks that have to cover the necessity under the negative worst-case stress test scenario. So I would like again to point out that these banks are stable in the current times. It's just in a hypothetical negative scenario that they have to manage well as well. On the Eurozone, I'm sure you know that we are on the currency board for more than 20 years, and since the Bulgarian leu is irrevocably pegged to the euro, we would not expect any difficulties with the smooth changeover happening later on after finalizing the ERM2 stay. So practically, we don't see we would need much preparation in that side. In that regard, we worked a bit on the changeover plan. This is something typical for all candidates for the Eurozone, but we prefer to do this step by step. So now we are focused on joining the ERM2 first.
Okay. If I can ask a cheeky question, other than the banking point, what's the biggest threat to that 2023 deadline or target?
Well,
if any,
probably Eurozone crash.
Okay.
Highly hypothetical, but still non-negligible.
Okay, in that case, let me talk about the banking point. You mentioned the stress tests, and being in the euro, clearly you have a very robust banking system, but that's not entirely under your control. Obviously, the majority of banks in Bulgaria are owned by foreign subsidiaries, whether it's Unicredit, OTP, KBC, they're all very large players in the Bulgarian banking market. What can you do or what are you doing to make the banking system more robust from external threats, exogenous threats?
Well, maybe first to clarify the facts, most of the foreign-owned banks that are present in Bulgaria are owned by Eurozone member states. So this is one of the major factors for the stability of the banking system, because after the crisis in 2008, when we faced this neighborhood crisis, especially in Greece, we took our lessons, and also the European Union, they made quite an effort. We made quite an effort to overcome the weaknesses of the past. So with the banking union, the banking package, CRD, I believe, and it's common view, that the banking system has been strengthened EU-wide. But what's on top of this is the possibility to use the so-called Pillar 2 framework, where, in our case as a host country, we can impose stricter regulations on the subsidiaries of foreign-owned banks to behave in a way not hampering our financial and banking stability.
In terms of, Pillar 2 capital and liquidity within the country and not being downstreamed from parents?
In terms of supervisory requirements related to the capital and liquidity, exactly, yeah. So since we have mostly subsidiaries, not branches, the central bank actually it's easy for the central bank to manage those risks well.
I'm presuming the development of a local currency capital market is important to that.
Yes, it's been declared for many years that it's an important priority, but so far I would not say it's a success story.
But it is an ongoing initiative. It is something you're actively trying to do things about to develop, or?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, it was the Bulgarian Stock Exchange that took the lead and tried to combine the efforts of the ministries, the banking sector, the investors in general, institutional investors as well, to work on developing new products and facilitating the exchange on the stock exchange. But we depend on supply and on demand as well. So if we don't have sufficient supply with high quality products, then it's still far from what we would like to see there.
It's a common problem in a lot of countries. There's too many deposits relative to loans. There's too much cheap liquidity going on to develop that.
Yeah. So we opened the secondary market for the government bonds to the stock exchange as well, so they can be traded there, but the liquidity is pretty low.
I'm sorry, the liquidity is?
Liquidity is not that big, and the interest is still low.
And that's domestic currency bonds. I have to ask you about the foreign currency bonds, and I think you haven't accessed the market since 2016, am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
Clearly, the market out there is phenomenally robust at the moment for a euro-denominated. You're a strong investment grade. Bear in mind, there's a lot of bankers in the room, so be careful what you say here. Would you consider external funding?
Yeah, actually, I'll start again with the annual budget law, where we foresee such an option to go to the foreign markets. However, we stick to couple of milestones when defining the debt management policy, and one of them is that we need to ensure sustainable fiscal policy, which means that debt management policy will follow the needs of the budget. So in case we don't need liquidity, other than refinancing, repaying the old debt, we would not go for issuance despite the very favorable conditions we face nowadays. The second milestone is about ensuring enough fiscal buffers, and we have them in place. We have around 10% of our GDP in the fiscal reserve. So we have short-term liquidity that might be needed in the course of the year. And the third milestone is something that's been one of the major criteria of the credit rating agencies, and it's about the structure of our debt. Nowadays we have prevailingly foreign-owned, foreign-issued bonds compared to the locally issued ones. So now we prefer to focus on the local markets to issue debt and to recover the balance there.
That's disappointed all of the DCM bankers in the room. I'm sure that's
I didn't reject the opportunity to go to the foreign markets. So.
Excellent, noted. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for your comments, and wish you well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.